So Marios is the Executive Director and Head of Fisheries Research at Enalia's Physis Environmental Research Center. He has a bachelor degree in marine biology and oceanography from University of Plymouth, UK. And he has a master's degree in marine biology and business administration from the University of Plymouth and the University of Central Lancashire, UK, respectively. And he's currently undertaking his PhD in fisheries ecology and management at the University of Patras. His research interests are related to fisheries, ecology, bycatch, megafauna depredation, and discards, as well as fisheries socioeconomics. Apart from his scientific work in fisheries, Marios is an active member of several working groups that deal with fisheries-related issues in the Mediterranean Sea. He has long experience in onboard observations with small-scale and pelagic longline fisheries. You're going to learn all about them today in Marios' presentation. And Marios is also very passionate with community ecology, ecological statistics, and data visualization. And he's actually the person that makes fisheries alive. For us, it was just a chapter in a book, but fisheries is a far more personal issue, and Marios manages to bring this to life. So Marios, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christiana, and welcome everyone to this Friday's webinar. The title of this presentation is Fisheries in the Eastern Mediterranean. Is quite general, but I wanted to cover different topics related to fisheries and to the Eastern Mediterranean. So my presentation is divided in three different parts. The first part is about I would like to introduce you to fisheries. The second part is to introduce you to the environmental status of the Eastern Mediterranean, and the final part is to present to you the work we did in Cyprus in relation to bycatch. So now I'd like to present to you, I would like to give you an overview of the fisheries in the Mediterranean and Black Sea. In the Mediterranean and Black Sea now there are about 84,000 fishing vessels. This offers jobs to about 183 fishermen, and along the value chain of fisheries it employs about 500,000 people. The estimated total contribution to the regional economy from fisheries is about 7.8 billion US dollars and 3 billion in annual revenue to fishermen themselves directly. There was an increase by 1% between 2020 and 2021 in revenue. It's important to mention that from the total fishing fleet in the Mediterranean, 82% of those vessels are small-scale vessels, and the job numbers decreased by 6% in 2020-2021. The average total annual catch the same year was about 2 million tons. Now it is estimated that 58% of commercial stocks are fished outside biologically sustainable limits, meaning that 58% of fish stocks are overfished. This is another word for overfishing. And previous year, in 2020, it was 73%. Of course, this dramatic decrease from the 73% to the 58% is not because we managed to effectively manage fisheries. Is only because of restrictions due to COVID and reduction of fishing activity. Now, the average fishing pressure is still 2 times more than the sustainable level of fishing. But since 2012, the average fishing pressure has decreased by 31%. Now, this figure shows the percentage of stocks fished out at biologically sustainable and unsustainable levels. These are all the regions of the world. And down here, you see the Mediterranean and Black Sea. And as you can see, Mediterranean is the most unsustainably fished region in the world. Major problem in the sector is that the sector is aging. There are no more new people. There is no new generation entering the profession of fisheries. As I said before, 82% of the total fishing fleet in the Mediterranean is small-scale fisheries. This is very important. This is why it's highlighted here. The total employment in small-scale fisheries is 61% of the total employment. But despite these high numbers, high percentages here, the total revenue is just 26%, and the total catch from small-scale fisheries is just 15%. So this graph shows the fleet segment composition at each region in the Mediterranean. This is for the total Mediterranean Sea, for all Mediterranean Sea, and this is for Western, Central, Adriatic, Eastern Mediterranean, and Black Sea. As you can see, the majority of the fleet in all regions of the Mediterranean is composed by small-scale vessels and a small number by pelagic trawlers, beam trawlers, and perseiners. These are other type of fishing gears used. These are industrial fisheries. Now, if we look at the total landings in the Mediterranean and Black Sea from 1970 to 2021, you can clearly see that there is a decreasing trend in the catch, which shows how problematic our and at what stage our biological resources currently are. Now, the contribution of each fleet segment in relation to the total landings, you can see now that the total landings, the majority from all regions in the Mediterranean, it comes from perseiners and pelagic trawlers and beam trawlers. This is the green and blue part, and just a small part comes from small-scale fisheries. And this is the same also for the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, the Eastern Mediterranean, the average annual landings in the Eastern Mediterranean is about 163 million, is about 15% of the total landings in the Mediterranean and Black Sea. And if we look at the major producers in the Mediterranean, these are Greece, Turkey, and Egypt, the major producers. Turkey is also the main producer in the Mediterranean Sea, not just in the eastern part, but it's also the main producer in aquaculture products. Now, the revenue from marine capture fisheries by country here, for Cyprus is about $9 million in annual revenue. And if we look at this part of the figure, you can see that almost 50% comes from small-scale fisheries and the other 50% from industrial fisheries. Yeah, so something that I didn't explain, landings is the fishery products, the catch that is it reached the markets, it reach the market is what is landed at the ports. There are other part of the catch that is discarded or thrown back at the sea. Now, this graph shows the employment on onboard on small scale and industrial fishing vessels. Cyprus has about 793 people employed in fisheries. This also includes some non-professional fishers, and you can see that the majority of these people employed are small-scale fishermen. Okay, so the reason I'm showing all this about fisheries is just to show you how important is the sector in the Mediterranean, how much it contributes to the regional economy, but it's not just contributing to, is not just important economically, but it's also important in terms of social and cultural. So it has a social and cultural importance in the region. This is the last graph I'm going to show you. This is, if we take the example of the Eastern Mediterranean, you can see that in the Mediterranean, about 54,000 people are employed in fisheries, and it generates a revenue of about 683 million US dollars. So that's for a very brief and an introduction to the fisheries in the Mediterranean in terms of numbers. Now, moving on to the second part of this presentation, which is to understand the environmental status of the Eastern Mediterranean and what differentiates the Eastern Mediterranean from the other regions of the Mediterranean Sea. I will focus this presentation on the Levantine Basin. So the Levantine Basin is characterized by negative freshwater balance, meaning that there is very limited freshwater input in the sea, has high evaporative rates, rapid surface water warming, is an ultra-oligotrophic environment, meaning that there is very low primary productivity, meaning very low production of phytoplankton and zooplankton, hence very low production in organic matter, very high temperatures sea surface temperatures ranging from 15 to 30 degrees Celsius, and salinity ranging from 38 to 39 parts per thousand, and these are the highest records in the Mediterranean Sea. The Cyprus eddy, this is the most dominant water mass in the region, is very important. It's a very important water mass that because it's circulating nutrients from the deep sea. Also, there are many upwelling events. These upwelling systems are responsible for, again, bringing nutrients from deep waters to the surface waters, and hence contributing to primary productivity, to the production of phytoplankton. The area is characterized by high biodiversity but low abundance, meaning that there is high number of species, but in terms of individuals, their numbers are very low. There is intense human activity in the area: shipping, fishing, tourism, hydrocarbon exploration, and pollution. And last but not least, the profile wouldn't have been completed without including non-native and invasive species, which is now part of the, especially for the Eastern Mediterranean. So understanding now the major stressors in the Eastern Mediterranean is climate change first, non-native species and invasive species, habitat loss, which is usually caused by destructive fishing methods, overfishing, and bycatch. So the Eastern Mediterranean region is a climate change hotspot. It's a region in which the climate change is expected to have larger effects than other regions. The map you see is from last August. The warmer the color, the more reddish the color, the highest the sea surface temperature, and you can see that the eastern part was had the highest records compared to the rest of the Mediterranean. Again, this is the average sea surface temperature between 1987 and 2019. Again, you can see here that the Levantine Basin is the warmest region. But of course, in order to be able to understand the full extent and impact of climate change, we have to look at the sea surface temperature anomalies. Sea surface temperature anomalies have become an important and essential indicator to predict extreme events. And I will explain what these extreme events are. Looking at the graph, you can see that these anomalies have increased over the years. Again, the highest value of these anomalies characterize the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. Some example of these extreme events are marine heat waves. We have experienced heat waves last summer, very intense heat waves, and increased and prolonged temperatures. Now, these marine heat waves and increased and prolonged temperatures lasting for a long time have been responsible for mortality and mass mortality of many species, species that are sessile, species that are immobile, such as algae, corals, sponges, species that are not like fish that they can swim to deeper waters which are colder and the environment is more stable. Now this is a study published last year and it is looking, this map shows the annual frequency trend in marine heat waves between 1982 and 2021, and marine heat waves show an increase in frequency, intensity, and duration in the Mediterranean. A new set of larger and more intense marine heat waves events have been recorded in the past 20 years, and the highest values were recorded in the Levantine Basin and south of Greece. Now, there is a strong variability across the region, across the Mediterranean, of the annual average duration of these marine heat waves, and this variability ranges uh, from 10 to 27 days, with an average duration of 16 days. And again, the highest average duration values were recorded in the Levantine Basin. So imagine now a marine heat wave lasting for 16 days or 20 days or 27 days, what effects could have on entire ecosystems. Now, this study was also published last year, and it looked at the expected changes in the fish biomass of native and non-native species according to a climate change scenario. This is a case study from the Israeli continental shelf, and the results indicate that under business as usual conditions, the biomass of native species will decrease. This is the top left figure, which shows a decrease in the native fish biomass, and the biomass of the non-native species will increase. This is the figure in the bottom left. And they also predicted that there will be a decrease in the general in fishing catch in general. So now you see that the impacts of climate change is not just on ecosystems, it will affect the livelihoods of fishermen and our lives as well. This picture is from Cyprus. This is a regular catch from a small-scale fisherman in Cyprus. I have a question here. What do you see? For people who know fish, they can understand that the majority of the catch is composed by non-native species, and this is not a rare phenomenon. This is regular now. This is what a catch in Cyprus fisheries looks like. More than 90% composed of non-native species. But fishermen, local communities learn to adapt to these changes. Fishermen are taking advantage of non-native species. This is the invasive lionfish, which many of you might be aware of. Is considered among the most problematic species and among the worst invaders. And now fishermen are taking advantage of these species to make a living. So people and communities are adapting to these changes. A quick recap. Now, the major stressors of ecosystems in the Eastern Mediterranean is fishing, climate change, and the input of non-native species. Now, increasing temperature can impact marine ecosystems through different mechanisms, such as availability and distribution of species. Native species might migrate to other areas, and non-native species take advantage of these empty now habitats. Increasing temperature can affect organism resilience and survival of species. What I explained before with marine heat waves and how these increased temperatures can impact the survivability of many species. These environmental conditions now are becoming favorable for the establishment of non-native species in habitats that until now were too cold for them. Now, fishing is the main activity that profoundly affects ecosystem in the Eastern Mediterranean. Please note that I'm not talking just for Cyprus. Please also remember that Cyprus is the only European country in the Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Levantine basin is the only country that follows EU regulations. So when I'm saying fishing is the main activity that affects ecosystems, I'm not referring just for Cyprus. There are other countries that have highest impact um, in the area than Cyprus fisheries. Now, fishing is mostly coastal, non-selective, and not sustainable in many cases. Many fish stocks are still overfished, and now we know that unhealthy ecosystems and unhealthy native species populations are less resilient to climate change and to non-native species. When ecosystems are healthy, are more able to withstand changes in the climate and able to fight against non-native species. Now moving on to the third and last part of my presentation um, is to discuss about bycatch. So bycatch, it refers to the incidental capture of non-targeted species in fishing operations, meaning that these species were not intended to be caught. They were not targeted by the fishermen, but were incidentally caught. Now, bycatch of vulnerable species refers to the incidental capture of sharks and rays, sea turtles, marine mammals, and seabirds. This is a very critical issue in the Mediterranean Sea and worldwide, but is also considered as an important threat to the profitability and sustainability of fisheries. Bycatch has shown to be closely linked, related to overfishing, and is a result of unselective fishing gear and unselective fishing practices. Now, by removing these large predators, these top predators and keystone species like sharks, it can alter and change entire ecosystems and make them more vulnerable to climate change and the introduction of non-native species. And the principal driver of bycatch is the non-selective and destructive fishing methods, as well as overfishing, as I explained before. The pictures you see in this slide are from our research project we had in Cyprus, the Cyprus bycatch project, and were recorded by our team. Now, each year, worldwide, is estimated that about 250,000 turtles are getting bycaught in fishing gear, about 300,000 whales and dolphins, and more than 100 million sharks and rays are getting bycaught in fishing gear. Now, through our project, the Cyprus Bycatch project, this was a 5-year project funded by Mao Foundation. We estimated an annual bycatch rate of 37,000 sharks and rays and 4,000 turtles, marine turtles. Of course, these are estimates, but the numbers are still high. Now, from the project, we identified that our results show that the percentage of the bycaught vulnerable species per taxonomic group Um, Now, the majority of the species bycaught were sharks and rays. This was 90% of the bycaught species that were recorded from the project. About 9% sea turtles, and we had a few records of dolphin bycatch. Now, um, these are the percentages of the bycaught individuals that they were released alive. They were released alive back in the sea. Only 35% of sharks and rays were released alive, and 88% of sea turtles. Some people think that all turtles that are getting bycaught on net are released dead, but this is not the case, and this is not our results showed. Now, the reason sharks and rays are so low is only because many of these species are not released back. They have commercial value and they are landed, and fishermen sell them to make a profit. That's the reason. Usually, normally, sharks and rays don't die on fishing gear. They are they are strong. They can stay alive on the fishing gear, and they can be released alive back in the sea. But only because many of these individuals are landed, um, the percentage is low. Now, the from the individuals that were bycaught, according to their status in the IUCN Red List, 26% of those individuals were vulnerable, 6% were endangered, 21 were near threatened, and 11% were critically endangered. 32% were considered least concern, and 4% data deficient. Data deficient means that their status is not yet evaluated. Now, these are pictures from Cyprus. These are some pictures from our colleagues from the north spot. These are angel sharks, critically endangered species, and very rare. And this is the um, uh, Gymnural tavella butterfly ray. It's very, very rare and also critically endangered species. Many turtles, pelagic sharks, and dolphins. Um, I'm finishing my presentation with a very short clip, very short video. This is a clip from a documentary that we're preparing to show the work we did through the Cyprus bycatch project in Cyprus. This is how nets are set on seabed. There were many incidents of turtle bycatch. Yeah, I have to say that our project didn't just look at the um, scientific part of bycatch. We also raise awareness among the public, and another important part of this project it was that we trained fishermen how to safely handle and how to safely release turtles so we can increase their post-release survivability. This guy was lucky. So thank you everyone. That was for me many information.
Thank you, Marios. It was a wonderful presentation. And if I might add, when you said about the invasive alien species, the lionfish, it's also delicious. So if you find it in the market, go and try it out. It's delicious, and it can help manage the populations if we start preferring these fish and we enable fishermen to fish them more often and use them and put them out in the market. We can do our part as a community, as the public. We have one question, Marios. It's from Yakovos Dimitriou. Many thanks for this wonderful talk, Marios. Based on evidence regarding the increase of non-native species, global rise of sea temperatures, and the reduction of people entering the fishing industry, what should we expect to happen in Cyprus? How do we expect our everyday lives to change? Example, will we have less fish on our tables? Will our fish diet change? Lastly, can we do something about these issues?
Yeah.
Very good question. Thank you, Yakovos.
Thank you, Iagove. It's a very, very important question. And this is one of the reasons that I was highlighting the importance of small-scale fisheries is because that we can have access to fresh fish, locally produced, and small-scale fisheries are considered among the less destructive. Is considered the less destructive fishing fleet because they use methods that do not harm habitats and seabed. I don't know how our lives will change. This is a very difficult question to answer, but I can tell you that there are species like the invasive lionfish, many other that currently do not have natural predators. So the only predator now they have is fishermen. By fishing them, we are controlling their population, the expansion of their population, and at the moment is the only thing, is the best thing we can do. So it's really difficult to say what will happen. There are the fact that we don't have natural predators to fight these invasive species is problematic, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Is quite difficult question to answer.
It is. It's one that requires a lot of data, and this is why we need to continue research, monitoring, and surveillance in order to gather data in order to extract this kind of assumptions: what to do, what will happen, what will change. For sure, if small-scale fisheries is eliminated from Cyprus, we will lose the wild nutritionous fish that we have. The hotels, the restaurants, everything that will remain without fresh fish and pelagic fish.
And Christiana, the environment is changing so rapidly. We have the introduction of the rate of introduction of these non-native species has increased dramatically. So really, you cannot. It's very difficult to predict what will happen and how you can manage non-native species effectively. And let's not think just about fish, not just what we can see. There are many non-native invasive diseases that have been responsible for causing the mass mortality for many native species.
Thank you, Marios. We have one more question from Carlos. Actually, we have two more questions.
Yes.
Carlos says, thanks for the interesting presentation in relation to nets, how bycatch can be reduced.
Yes. So if we look at the root of the problem is the unselectivity of the fishing gear used. The less selective the fishing gear is, the more likely is that you have bycatch. By switching to more selective fishing gears, which there are examples, and there are methods used in other parts of the world, in the Mediterranean. For example, there are specific traps that are used to catch fish, some species of fish, to catch crabs, which are considered very selective. This is one example. Avoiding areas of high bycatch, this could help areas or seasons of bycatch. Um, uh, Target catch plays an important role. We see that during the fishing period of pickerel, Spigara maris, and Spigara maena, and bok, bycatch is very low because the fishery is very targeted. So I think switching to more selective fishing gear is key. But another thing which is does not reduce bycatch, but increases the post-release survivability of species, is to train fishermen how to handle these species, how to safely release them back in the sea quickly without harming them, without, for example, before the project, before we started trainings, fishermen, the only thing they knew how to remove, for example, sharks and rays from the nets was to catch them from their gills. This automatically destroys the only organ that they have to breathe. So even if they were released alive back in the sea, you don't know the fate of these species because they were harmed. So uh, training fishermen on how to safely handle and release vulnerable species is very important in increasing their survivability.
The next question is from Nicolas Karamalakis. What happens when sea turtles are bycaught? What's the procedure when injured individuals are caught? And are there any rehabilitation centers in Cyprus?
Mhm. Yes, again, through these workshops we did with fishermen, we trained them also how to handle turtles, which is different from other species. We teach them how to allow time, how to help turtles expel water that may have in their lungs, and allow time for the turtle to rest before releasing the bug in the water. These are some standard practices that they learn to do in order to help the turtles um, um, survive after release. Because even if they seems alive and you immediately release it back in the water, if it has water in the lungs, the animal may die. So yes, if the animal is injured for any other reason apart from having waters in the lungs, or I don't know for what else, if it hits by the propel of the boat or it has an injury, it could take it to to the rehabilitation center. There is one rehabilitation center in Meneu, uh, it runs from the Department of Fisheries, and this is the procedure basically.
Yes, and if anyone sees or catches, they can find the phone numbers on the DFMR's website and the hours that they can call, even if it's a dolphin or a monk seal or a turtle, they can call the hotline and report it. They have a rehabilitation center, as you said, in Menu for sea turtles, and it had some very good examples of recovering and then releasing back to the nature.
And I have to
I
say,
don't see it.
Christiana, that we
Mhm.
didn't have any. We had in our record more than 400 onboard observations with small scale fishers. We didn't have any. We never had any record of turtle being hit by the propel of the boat. They are usually, you know, in a bad condition. They may have water in the lungs. This is the more what happens usually with the turtles.
Are they usually smaller or bigger when they get caught in the nets? I mean, younger individual, or it doesn't discriminate ages
No,
and
no,
nothing.
no, doesn't matter. We just, even though we haven't done the in-depth analysis, from our preliminary analysis, we have seen that the larger individuals, the adults, are more likely to survive compared to the small ones.
Thank you, Marius. Does anyone else has a question? We'll give like a minute to type your question in. I also, Marius, from the bycatch, you said that you also saw monk seals and dolphins performing depredation on the fish stocks, or that they were caught. How does that affect the fishermen as well?
Yes, good question, Christiana. So, uh, as I said, depredation is the act of removing the fish from the nets or the long line or whatever. This not just is uh, reducing the catch of the fishermen, but during this attempt, especially dolphins and turtles, which are big animals, they destroy the nets, which may cause a very significant economic loss due to fishing gear damages to the fishermen. And this is very normal. It happens like if they if there is dolphin depredation or if there is a turtle caught on the nets, usually the nets are destroyed. So fishermen either need to fix them or if they cannot be fixed, they have to replace the nets, which costs.
So it's a loss of income for them as well because they have to
Yes.
spend. So it's not something that fishermen are after doing. It's just something that happens. It's accidental and it sure costs for them when they get caught. So um, if they get incentives to change their gear to more sustainable fishing methods, I think they will do it.
Yeah. Something that I didn't mention, there are also some technological devices that are currently tested. Some have been seem to be effective, reducing some to some extent the bycatch. Some others didn't work. We tested some of these products in the project. For example, there are some devices that they are used to scare turtles away from the nets. These are some. It's a flashing light which is supposed to scare the turtle away from the net. There are other devices which are called pingers. These are acoustic deterrent devices which are used using a very high frequency. They are supposed to create discomfort to dolphins and um, make them, run away from the fishing gear. So these are some devices that have been tested. There are others that are still developed, under development, um, because it's an ongoing problem. I catch fishermen look at it from their uh, perspective, the perspective of financial sustainability, losing their catch, their fishing gear, but it's also, and more importantly, an environmental problem.
Have you ever witnessed the fisherman hurting one of these animals?
No, never,
No.
never. I don't know if I was on board, but I had long discussions with fishermen that we worked with. They know us, they are familiar with us. We spend nights, days with them. Never expressed such an attitude of harming these animals. Even though they get angry when they make damages on the nets, but they never express such uh, πώς το λένε τώρα, behavior of hurting these animals.
Right. Thank you, Marius. I think this was all for today. We don't have any more questions, and I'm pretty much very well covered. And your presentations was, it could be a lot bigger if we had a lot more time. We could like have eight seminars just for fisheries here in Cyprus, and you summed it up pretty good. Thank you so much, Marios, and thank you everyone for being here with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Bye.